Good day, chess world. So, last video, hopefully you've watched as we continue this wonderful series on Capablanca's best games. It was the longest, one of the most challenging ones because of the length of the game. But this game is, I promised you in the last one, a return of the same opponent. The colors are flipped, the colors are reversed. But this one is described as a game of 5 players. 5 players? Was this a team consultation? Was this a group effort? No, it's just Capablanca demonstrated just how awfully good he is in this game. This game that we're about to jump into, Capablanca plays with the strength of Philidor from the early years, of understanding pawn structure, some of the profound concepts from Lasker, from Bogolyubov, a wonderful attacking player, Flemish player, and of course, as Nimzowitsch using space and Alekhine for total control. Probably we can add in the sixth player, he played as Capablanca himself, and this game is a great demonstration of just how good Capablanca was. I want to remind you that Janowsky had played for the world title. Janowsky was one of the world's best players, and we're going to see how Capablanca totally controls him from start to finish. So let's jump into today's principles that I want you to carry forward, looking to learn with in this one. So first and foremost, as I said to you, this game described by Chernev is 5 masters in one. One of the big things to look at in this one is the principle of playing for 2 weaknesses. Please, for those of you signed up for the notes, this is easy stuff. You can go back, you can review some of those principles that have been raised in the earlier ones. But otherwise, hey, if you haven't signed up, join on the email list and I'll send you a free gift. Now, also, you can go back to the earlier videos and take a good look at the principle of 2 weaknesses and how it gets used. Here we're going to see it in action, where Capablanca shifts from one wing to the other because he has more space and more targets. The second one is going to be a wonderful, brilliant theme for you to remember. When you have the bishop pair, activate your MVP, activate your most valuable piece. And what piece is that? That, as we will see, is the bishop that the opponent doesn't have. Then 2 more wonderful ones we're going to see. The art of exchanging, where here Capablanca knows how to build a massive positional advantage and then turn it into a concrete edge, something that's more permanent. And finally, that checkmate, getting the enemy king in trouble and focusing on how to use that, even though we're playing in an endgame. Here, the rooks were on the board. The enemy king was in trouble, and he used that as an attacking theme. So let's jump into this wonderful position that we're reviewing today and get our understanding of what we're talking about. So here we have in game 24. Black has just played pawn to f4, and I want to just unpack for you Chernev's wonderful writing. By all means, please pick up the book. As you'll see, there are some wonderful themes that he does cover and some wonderful articulate things that he puts in. But here, just to quote him, is a wonderful paragraph where he says, the subtle strategy initiated by his 10th move could have been a profound concept of Lasker's. It's earlier in the game. Very nice idea of improving the worst place piece. Then he says the powerful restraining moves by the pawns are worthy of a Philidor. The switch attack from one side of the board to the other is reminiscent of Bogolyubov's attacks. A wonderful, difficult one for many English speakers to enunciate. The sacrifice of a pawn on the queen's side in order to win a piece on the king's side is in the style of a Spielmann. The mate threat on an open board in the endgame might have been the inspiration for the finish of the Nimzowitsch-Bernstein game at Carlsbad in 1923. The whole game might have even been a breathtaking brilliancy of Alekhine's, except that it was played by Capablanca. So high praise for an absolutely wonderful game. And we're going to jump in and unpack this one and have a look at it. Now let's first start off in this interesting position where fundamentally black is to play, white is pushed f4. Well, who do we think is better or worse? What do we think is going on? And this is important. We're trying to figure out a little bit of our bearings of how would we judge if we were playing this position? What would we do? So first of all, black is that bit better. And why? Well, as strange as it might seem, black actually has more space because they have this clear play on the queen side, and none of their pieces are currently drastically hindered. We have this rook on the a file, semi-open file, which is not at all creating the pressure on the pawn, but at least there is a potential future for maybe b5, b4. We can see that this queenside play, they've got all of these bishops that can put trouble onto this side. And also the black king has got a way of joining in this case. Now, obviously, time-wise, we can take a note that if we give white a good amount of time, potentially they can get their king in. But I want you to see, if we look longer term in this game, there is a giant problem for white, that they have this, well, shall we say, a big pawn with a hat on. That bishop, of course, has no positive moves to make and immediately is carrying its own problems. So that's why Capablanca says, you know what, I want to make sure that that bishop cannot, in this position, join into the game. And that's sort of his first focus here as a plan. One of the other plans we could certainly do if you were choosing your side is to play an idea like g5, and it might almost look counterintuitive. With all the pieces sitting on the queen side, why would we play g5? Well, the idea is to stretch the game. Why? Because all of the pieces that black has are long-range pieces. So, okay, so we get a wonderful move b5. Now, at first sight, the threat is not to push b4, but it is to hold that in the back pocket for the future planning, because if white were to play b4 themselves, simply bishop takes, captures, and now after rook to a4, well, this would be very bad for Janowsky. The rook is threatening to take the pawn when it's good and ready. Otherwise, the rook can jump in and double. And if this rook captures, then suddenly, oops, we see the point of b5. Now there is the semi-open file going after the pawn. So when I said to you, he played b5 to stop bishop b4, it's pretty much what he's doing. So a very clever theme, king f2. He's making sure that, hey, I don't want my opponent to trade off their worst placed piece here, and that's valuable. That's a nice little theme. So the rook goes to a4, keeps up the plan and the play, king moves to e3, rook moves to a8. A logical plan. And it might look really weird. Well, hold on, why are we doubling rooks and all this pressure onto a pawn that's protected by another pawn? Well, because we have this pawn break. We're prepared to push b4 and push them forward. And how does this work? Well, the pawn would be pinned. So here, the opponent, Janowsky, is no fool, and he plays rook b1. He gets himself out of the pin. Rather strange situation that the rook has to move to this poor square. But remember when I said to you, black has more space, and what's causing it is the fact that they have this pawn that's advanced on the side of the board, and it's connected in this little collection of three pawns that are stacked up here in this diagonal. So it means on the queen side, it's so much easier for black to play. But now, what are we to do here? Very important moment that we stop and think, because we are hammering with everything that we have on the queen side at this stage. We can't exactly get our king involved. The light squared bishop, that is the bad bishop for black. But as we'll see, it is the hidden superstar in this case. So what should we do? Well, of course, we should open a new front. And what I do want you to see, another advantage that exists right now for black, is the fact that black has all long-range pieces. The bishops, the rooks are all quick-moving pieces. So here, how do we open the new front? I see nothing wrong with pushing g5 immediately. Capablanca almost out of hand just plays h6 and pushes the pawn. Why would this g5 be good? Well, we want to achieve the move, and I think Capablanca just didn't want to see a change in the pawn structure, but at this stage, this bishop delivering this pin is rather useful. So Capablanca does a nice theme. He says, no, I'm not going to rush. I'm going to play h6, because h4 would, of course, benefit black in this position. Why? Because in future, when g5 now happens, this pawn on g3 would become a bit weak. So fundamentally, not the position that white would really want to allow at this stage. So white follows a plan that we've seen again and again in these sessions. Hopefully you've been going through and picking up on some of these strategic themes, which is don't push pawns where you stand weaker. And on the king side, it's not that he's lacking space, he just doesn't have pieces to bring there. So that's important to take note of. So the knight goes to f3. Capablanca says, I want g5. And now it's a very slow but smart plan from Janowsky. He plays knight e1. What do you think the plan is from Janowsky? Why did he play knight e1? I mean, the knight doesn't like this side of the board. What do you think the idea is? Where is the knight going? Well, in simple terms, the knight is trying to find itself a nice outpost square, so he would like to go round to c2 and get into b4. That's part of his idea. Even b4, as you can see, is not the scariest block to be sitting on, but he would certainly like to go knight c2 and then help to play bishop b4 and trade off the bishop. So although knight e1 is, shall we say, a strange-looking move, as Chernev called it actually makes a bit of sense when we think about Janowsky adopting this plan of saying, what's my worst placed piece? Well, it's this bishop. And why is that bishop called a bad bishop? What is the cause of its problems? Well, its own pawns. So from this game, I also hope you can pick up how you can identify what is a bad bishop and what is a good bishop. And quite simply, is it limited by its own pawns that are fixed in the center? And that's what we have here. These pawns will never move. So that dark squared bishop of white is always going to be limited. That's very important. For black, this light squared bishop is always going to be limited. And when we say limited, it just means it will struggle to move from one side of the board to the other. And when it gets to the other side, it then has the same problem of getting back. But it does not, as we will see in this game, mean that your bad bishop cannot win you the game. So rook to g8, he's preparing to open up this file. Now suddenly we get this move king to f3. At no point would I describe here that Capablanca has a 1 position. What he does have, though, is a position which is so much easier to play. It's a dream position in many ways, because white can't make threats. White doesn't have any pieces that are threatening a check, a capture, or even a simple threat. Whereas black is the one that can start creating these targets and start building up. Black decides, am I pushing b4 this pawn break? Am I capturing here to open up this file? Am I pushing, continuing with the h-pawn? So all of that ability is sitting here in this case. So pawn takes f4. He opens up this file, maybe a bit soon, but we will see the clear intended plan. First things first, of course, the king cannot take because check. So Capablanca does a wonderful theme and says, I am opening this file now that I am ready to use it. He then plays rook back to a8 in preparation to move the rook up and double on the file. So now we get this move knight to g2. Janowsky gets a little bit distracted because he sees that, look, if he plays knight c2, it was probably still his best move. He didn't like the idea that the rook could come and double, and then, of course, with this potential threat, it's a problem. Also, he didn't like the idea the rook could come to h4, causing all this trouble for this h-pawn. It probably was still a better idea for him, but it's one of those positions where damned if you do, damned if you don't for poor Janowsky, because his knight just doesn't have any good squares. Even though the position's closed, knights need outposts. They need to get to d6, c5, f5. They need to sit on a square where they're protected by pawns and they can influence the middle of the board. So knight g2, rook to g4, okay. Now he plays rook g1. And I would point out that this is a mistake. My advice to you is don't pin yourself. Don't get yourself stuck in pins. So this is now where Capablanca really starts to seize things, because suddenly he's stuck in this nasty pin and he's got a bit of a problem. How does he get himself out of this pin? So he decides to play bishop to e1. Okay, Chernev describes this as an ingenious idea because the point is he would like to play bishop f2, move the knight out the way, and then he can trade off rooks and simplify his game. Well, there's a little bit of a problem here because hiding in this position is the MVP. Now, to use the sports analogy, if you like football, be it American or the kind where you play with your feet, you have a player in many games that is just better than his opposite number, that cannot be matched up. And it's very important. Your job, when they are playing well, when the game suits them, your team's job is get them the ball, get them the action, and they can win you the game. So be you a Lionel Messi, my apologies, be you a Messi or Ronaldo fan, guess what? If your team has that player, your job is get him the ball. If you're an American football fan and you are a Seahawks fan, well, you need to get from Sam Darnold, you make him get your decision and you make sure you get it to the best receiver you can. So in this game situation, I want you to think in the very simple terms, well, what's your MVP on this one? Not your sports MVP. By all means, you can put that in here if you prefer Cristiano or you prefer Messi or Pele, Maradona. By all means, let's not get started, I guess, on the Jordan or LeBron debate. So in this case here, what do you think the MVP is? We're in competition. We've got all equal pieces. Who is going to be our game winner? Well, as I said to you earlier, it's your player, your piece that can do things that your opponent cannot. Which piece here is that? Which piece right now for black is the one piece that can do things that white cannot? Yes, it's the light squared bishop. That is the MVP. What? How can this be the MVP? Well, in this case, to use, again, stretching that sports analogy, you're the manager. Your job is, of course, to manage. You're the coach, depending which sport you like. But your job is now to make sure that you focus on getting this one in the game. You need to draw up the play, the game plan. How do you get this one in the game? And I want you to imagine here, if you picked up this bishop, so many of the kids out there love bug house, I give you the bishop in your hand, and I say to you, put it on the board. Where do you want it to go? Where is its best square? Well, it should be rather clear to you. We want to put it on e4. That would blow up the whole game. Well, how can we get there? It's ridiculous. Why am I saying get it there? Put that bishop there. Make it happen. And that is the brilliant move that we get in this position here. An absolutely brilliant move. Pawn to b4. What? How does this have anything to do with this bishop? Well, when we look clearly and we understand our end destination is here, that's the point. Bishop c2, bishop e4 is a devastating, wonderful plan. Remember when I said to you earlier, the bishops, they play the same as the rooks. They enjoy the long-range play. At the time, it might not have been clear, but now you can see it. How this bad, dark squared bishop is sitting all the way on black's queen side, behind these pawns, and it's about to arrive on e4, winning the game on the king side of white. Let's have a look. Pawn takes b4. If he plays bishop takes b4, well, in this case, I'm pretty sure bishop back here anyway is going to solve the problem with this piece. Part of the problem why Janowsky, stunned by this idea, doesn't want to enter this is, well, in the simplest of terms, he's still stuck in a pin, and he can't get himself out of the pin. This might have been a good try for him in this case, trying to play rook c1, but I think in this case here, bishop takes, pawn takes, very clear, winning back the material, targeting this weak pawn, and this is bad news for poor Janowsky in this case. So it was rather clear for him to analyze. So he didn't want to play bishop takes b4, but how much is his position struggling? That's his worst piece, is that dark square bishop. He would like to give it up. And notice, why am I saying it's his worst piece? Because it just doesn't have any threats it can make. It's a real struggle, even if we give it a few moves. So he wants to trade it off. So pawn takes. Now, of course, the bishop comes into a4. Now, if he played this move of rook to c1, how are we going to deal with this problem? What do you think Capablanca had in mind in this case? Well, I can highlight to you, Capablanca's thinking is quite simple and quite spectacular. he points out his opponent has no real constructive moves. So what he was going to do is, well, let's just give an example here. He, of course, can just bring the rook across and transpose into that variation we've just seen, where he's going to play bishop takes, rook takes, and this pawn is going to be in trouble. Or he can go rook g7 and point out to his opponent, you don't have any good moves. Why is that? Well, the bishop will just come back, target this pawn, and he still has this plan to come rook b8. Look at what Capablanca's done. The rook on c1 for white, the rook on g1, the knight on g2. None of these pieces seem to be working together for white at all. There's nothing in unison that they're doing. There's no common goal. Whereas the black pieces, we can see the threat covering on this side with this bishop. We're looking at this bishop looking to invade and cause trouble. The rooks are doubled here. Maybe Capablanca will just send his king across to give his king a job in this situation. And there's nothing that Janowsky can do because he's stuck in a horrible, nasty pin. So he tries to get active. I do want you to see this, that in the last video, please go back and watch Janowsky against Capablanca. He tried to follow the same theme. And as a matter of fact, he got himself into some wonderful defensive positions because he tried to get his rook as active as possible. It's a great tip to you. When you're defending, try to get active. Don't defend passively. So although this didn't turn out well for Janowsky, he was playing Capablanca. Let's give the guy some credit. So rook a1 is a great decision. He's trying to get active. Passive defense is going to be in a nightmare for a problem anyway. So in comes that MVP, bishop to c2. Now in this case here, bishop jumps into g3. Look, that poor bishop. It was a tall pawn with a hat on over here. And now it's once again joined into this poor pawn chain. That poor dark squared bishop has been horribly misused in this case. So yes, a very difficult position. He stuck himself into that pin, and now suddenly the bishop arrives on check. And I think let's give some applause to Janowsky here. He at least did not immediately lose a piece. It was so close. If we just see that bishop and the power that it delivers here, how close he was to losing a piece. So king has to drop back to f2, a really difficult situation that he's in. Maybe it was better to move the king, give himself a little bit more space, but it looks logical. The king is at least holding on here to the knight and preparing so the knight could move. Well, what do you think Kappa's got up his sleeve? How are you going to approach this position? This is a great theme here. Let's think about this. Well, for those of you who said that you want to move your rook across and grab this pawn, by all means, good plan, very, very nice idea in this case. Stretching that play from one side of the board to the other, yes, 100%. But I think earlier in the game, when we started, the way Capablanca approached it will be a bit of a clue to you. Capablanca really likes to push when he's got this play on the side of the board. So now he gets Harry the H-pawn involved. Yes, H5. Now we get that pawn looking to join in. We want to push in here and there. If you didn't know it already, all of your pawns have names. And of course, the H-pawn is Harry. And here he rushes into battle, preparing to push H4. This bishop is in trouble. This knight is in trouble. Wow, okay. So the opponent plays a great trick, because if knight to e3, let's put this one in the notes. Let's see who can add in. What did Capablanca have planned here? What do you think you would do when you're rushing forward? I mean, your rook's attacked. How many choices do you have? So please put this one down and you're typing out in those comments. And let's see who can put it in those comments below. So here, in this moment, instead, he plays this move rook a7, which is also a good defense. But we're missing a little bit of a problem. We have the opponent in a pin. The black pieces are so very active. And this is a great demonstration again from Capablanca, where he seizes those tactical opportunities. What would you do? I just said to you there's a tactic, so I gave you a nice little clue there. Black to play, win material. What are we looking to do? Yes, follow the forcing moves. We are going to play bishop takes g2 in this position. Be careful not to give counterplay, because a move like h4 is so very tempting. But the problem is the knight can take, and suddenly, oh, oops, we're pinned. Now, of course, we're not lost. As surprising as it is to be two little icons behind in terms of pawns, but why we're giving them a little bit extra. Instead, we have the wonderful bishop takes g2. He certainly can't take with a king, has to take with a rook. h4. Now that rook comes in, and I do want you to pick up on this theme. Remember what I said to you earlier from Janowsky? He pinned himself. Try not to do that in the game. It's rather simple, I know. Simple, easy advice, but a great one to follow through. Number one, try not to pin yourself. And number two, if you are in a pin, try to get out of the pin as quick as you can because of the issues that we've seen. What wonderful work from Capablanca here, opening up this file. So simply bishop takes h4, rook takes g2 check, king f3, Janowsky tries to get little something something. Now, hopefully, some of you remember, this is sort of the material distribution that we had in the previous game, where Janowsky was the exchange down, and Capablanca made a substantial mistake. He rushed to give back the material to try and make a technically won position, and then ended up making it a technically drawn position. And remember the tip I gave you, keep your material on as long as you can. So that's important. So rook takes h2. If you have that extra material, let your extra material work for you. And here, he certainly gets it right. Bishop takes e7. Rook takes check certainly wouldn't have helped more. Now in this position, what are we to do with the black pieces? And here, Capablanca is very smartly focused. The opponent's king is in trouble. We can set up some very nice mating nets. So he first plays rook h3 check, driving the king down, king to f2. And now we get a very interesting moment because he plays rook b3 and he says, do your worst with your discovered check. I don't believe it's going to do anything. And now when the bishop moves check, so be it. What are we going to do with our king? Do we move our king down to f8, to e8, or g6? Three choices, three candidates. There's a couple of ways for us to approach this, but I'm really hopeful you've picked up and learned from the previous videos and from those of you that are signed up with the notes on the email list. Activate your king. It's an endgame, activate your king. Rooks are on the board, get your king active. So king g6, yes, it costs us a pawn, but more important is our active king. Rook to e7, rook takes check. Really nice move. The king runs up to f3. And what I said to you, we're playing for mate. That enemy king is in trouble. How do we get to that mate? What are we looking to do? Well, rook a8, and the point is we're setting up an immediate mate in this position. So rook takes e6 check. Where do we put our king here? What are we doing with the king? Once again, we can move backward. We can also go to h5. What are we looking to do? Well, of course, we should not play king h5. That would be the one worst move to play on the board, because we should not go and give our opponent a victory where they would play rook h6 mate. Any of these king moves would do. He chose king to h7, and the point is that now we simply have rook h6 checkmate. Very, very important. Just be careful of that. As you're about to defeat your opponent, that is actually where in many cases you're in the most dangerous of situations, because maybe they can catch a stalemate, or as we can see there, a snapmate, where we just imagine we have an automatic win. So what a wonderful win from Capablanca. And I really want to highlight some of these big themes that we can understand. First is the play on the queen side, the fact that he built up the pressure to tie down his opponent. And then that focus on switching sides. That's very important. You want to tie down your opponent to one area of weakness. And where did he want to play, or why did he want to play on the queen side in the start? He had more space. He could easily bring every single piece to bring some sort of bearing there. Then, once all of White's pieces were tied down onto that queen side, what did he do? He switched sides. So let's remember this situation of Capablanca doubling onto this side of the board. Then once he saw, okay, I cannot get any more traction, I then open a new front. And notice this, he didn't rush with the opening of the file. This is very important. The first thing he did is he waited for the moment when the opponent cannot compete on the file. That's very important. He didn't open the file when there was competition. He waited to make sure there would be no competition. King f3, now he opens that file. Notice the opponent cannot compete on the file. He can't get a rook to bear in this position. And then, of course, this mistake comes in. It's the smallest of mistakes. It seemed almost like it was nothing, that getting himself pinned. But I do want to highlight to you, please don't pin yourself. Yes, in this case, he was trying to fight on the file, but he's ended up tying his pieces into a terrible knot. Then this next big moment is so very important when we suddenly have everything placed on the king side. Don't forget, when you have the bishop pair, what is your MVP? It's the bishop they don't have. You want to make that bishop as powerful as it can be. And once that bishop arrived on e4, that actually turned into tactically the winning plan. Every single piece joined in, and then of course we should not forget check, moving here, h5, bishop takes g2, and it seems so simple. What a spectacular win that we have here from Capablanca. So let's summarize some of these lessons that we can pick up and look at in this case. So let's first understand the two wings playing on the two sides. There were a couple of reasons why that worked so well for Capablanca. Number one was, look, in the honest truth is, Capablanca could not, Janowsky could not open a file. He couldn't open the A file, he couldn't open the G file. He didn't have those pawn breaks to open lines for his rooks. Those opportunities didn't exist. It was Capablanca who got to decide which files opened up and when. The second issue that's so important is rooks. When we talk about rooks, their ability to move quickly from one side of the board to the other is their huge plus point. And Capablanca was able to use that by tying his opponent down. Then we unpack this idea of the MVP. Bishop pair, it's a big deal. When you have the bishop pair versus a knight and bishop, or two knights, you've got that one piece that they don't have. Look to make that bishop as powerful as you can make it. And we saw the reward that Capablanca got in this game. Then don't be afraid to trade to decide the game. That's very important. The trades, in this case, forced the issue and allowed him to get that winning tactic. Sometimes we looked at that bishop on e4. Be careful. The bishop on e4 is a spectacular piece once it got there. There's a temptation to think, no, I should not trade it off. But that's a positional advantage, and he turned it into a material one. And then finally, look, when there's rooks on the board, when you have major pieces are the queens and rooks. When you've got those pieces on the board, don't forget that the king is still a target. Yes, time and again in the notes, in these videos, in this series, I keep referring to the endgame. You've got two plans. Attack the opponent's weak pawns and attack the opponent's, use your pass pawns. But there is always the superseding plan. What's the superseding plan? You've got to checkmate the king. Don't forget the king. So what a wonderful game, and really a spectacular one. Sign up to these notes so that you can get and refer to a lot of these themes and ideas that I put it in. And we're going to continue on this wonderful series. Join me in the next video where, we are just going to see how good Capablanca really is. This game is a great demonstration where almost a flawless victory. The next one, absolutely, really a big deal, where we're talking about the ideas of Capablanca and the great history he built in the Americas. And this next one is against Frank Marshall, the great American attacking player. And we'll actually see that he beats him in a slow, almost kind of unimaginative chess, but very valuable, where he takes all the energy out of the brilliant Frank Marshall. So join us in the next one as you get to learn how to take active players and squeeze the life out of them.